Welcome to Ask China, a special series focusing on important subjects related to the Chinese political system. In today's episode, we'll touch upon China's intellectual property rights protection. Gone are the old days when China was seen as the world's factory, churning out low-quality goods and imitating products and business models from abroad. The Chinese government is becoming more serious about protecting intellectual property rights as China attaches greater importance to innovation. With more patent filings now compared with Western developed countries, China is no longer just a factory, but rather a destination where ideas are given shape and incubated into successful global enterprises. What measures have the Chinese government taken to protect intellectual property rights? And should foreign companies be concerned about their intellectual property rights amidst the US-China trade frictions? For more, I'm pleased to be joined by Shen Hongyu, Presiding Judge of the Intellectual Property Court of the Supreme People's Court. This series, by the way, will be aired both on CGTN's new media platforms as well as on TV. The main idea is for our guest in the studio to answer questions collected from our viewers. So, Judge Shen, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to Ask China.
Thank you, Ms. Liu. It's my great pleasure to take part in this program of Asking China.
Thank you very much. It's the first time that we have a judge from the Supreme Court joining us on CGTN. I'm really honored. Now, I understand that the Intellectual Property Court was under the Supreme People's Court was only set up this January, but it's the first ever such court in the world under the Supreme People's Court, under the Supreme Court, let's say. Why the necessity of such a court?
Yeah, as you said, it is the first court in the world to collectively hear the patent and technology-related cases at the highest judicial level. It has three main functions: to unify the judicial standards. This is the first aspect. Before the establishment of the Intellectual Property Court of the SPC, the patent cases were heard by the 32 higher courts nationwide.
So basically you want intellectual property cases to be tried by a unified standard across the country and to be tried by real professionals, right, so that you can have the best result. But why does China want to do it on such a high level? I mean, as I said, it's the first ever such court within the Supreme Court of a country.
In compared to the other countries like Japan, all the patent appeal cases go to the Japan Higher Court, and in the United States, the patent case goes to the United States Court of Appeal for Federal Circuit. But in China, it is the first ever court at the highest judicial level that can guarantee the unification of legal standards, and also it expresses China's determination to ensure a sound business environment, because we all know that in the technology era, the intellectual property, especially the patent rights, are essential factor of the business environment.
Yeah. Well, I understand, as I said in the beginning of the program, China is becoming a world power in terms of patents, in terms of innovation. Actually, on the occasion of the setup of your court, I understand the head of the UN Agency on Innovation, the WIPO, Mr. Gori, he sent a congratulatory message via the internet. Shall we take a look at that first?
It's a privilege for me to be able to send a message of congratulations on the establishment of the Intellectual Property Court of the Supreme People's Court. This is an extremely important event, and it builds upon China's great commitment to intellectual property in general and to the fair, efficient and effective and expeditious judicial administration of intellectual property in China.
So that was the congratulatory message from the WIPO head. But tell us, Judge Shen, exactly what kind of cases do you hear?
The IPC of SPC will hear the patent cases, which include invention patent and utility model patent and other professional technology related cases, such as the computer software monopoly cases, and other the cases.
Okay, that's very interesting. So let's go to the questions that we have collected on Quora, on the Q&A website. This person by the name of Pat Roberts, he asks, how have views on intellectual property protection changed in China over the past 20 years?
Yeah, thanks to the netizens from their interest to China and their online questions. After 40-year reform and opening up, China has been a major intellectual property destination, and there is an inherent demand to improve intellectual property protection. So especially for the last 20 years, China has continuously reinforced intellectual protection through the legislation, the judiciary, and the law enforcement. At the legislation level, in addition to the revision of the trademark law and the law against unfair competition, and both the Copyright Act and the patent law are on the way.
All right. Okay, another question from the Quora website by this person called Richard Smith. Do Chinese courts respect and enforce intellectual property rights for foreign nationals and their patents?
Chinese courts adhere to the principle of equal protection regarding to the intellectual property protection. That's we call the national treatment to the foreign companies, business organizations, and individuals. In our general provision of civil law and our civil procedure law, the principle is well stated in the law and in judicial practice. The courts applied the principle in the cases.
Mm-hmm. So since the establishment of your court, the Intellectual Property Court under the Supreme People's Court, what kind of impact will that have on foreign businesses operating in China and those who might come to China in the future? Because the business environment is very much in the spotlight these days, especially when we talk about the Sino-US trade friction that has been going. It's one of the central concerns of foreign businesses. What is the Supreme Court planning to do so that the business environment are more equitable for Chinese and foreign enterprises?
In addition to what I said, improve the transparency, unification of a judicial standard, and enhance efficiency, our mission is to build the intellectual property court to the booster of technology innovation, the prime and litigation destination of international intellectual property protection, the leading court of patent trials and testing field of the judicial reform. So I trust both the Chinese companies and the foreign companies will benefit from the higher level intellectual property protection offered by our new court.
Mm-hmm. This question from a Quora website by someone anonymous, but the question goes, what is the future of patent law and intellectual property rights likely to be when China becomes the world's #1 economy? And second question by Nathan Kimberlin, what steps, if any, should be taken regarding IP protection in China?
In the future, China will build a more excellent judicial team to guarantee the intellectual property protection, and about the legislation level, the patent law, and the Copyright Act revision are on the way. So we can expect China will continuously to improve the international intellectual property protection to a greater extent.
So what steps will be taken besides appointing more judges in the future? What other things is China doing? to further protect IP?
Yeah, I would like to mention that the information technology adopted by the Supreme People's Court, now we launched a smart court scheme, and it will help the judges to efficiently deal with the cases.
Okay. Any further laws that are being made in China so that there will be more laws that you can use?
That's a revision of a patent law and the Corporate Act, and the judicial interpretation regarding the business secret, the know-how is also under the way. Mm-hmm. So I think the law and the judicial interpretation will help judges to deal with the IP cases.
Okay, my final question. I was in the Supreme Court once, and I was very intrigued by how smart your technology has been, right? You have this robot receptionist, you have a huge archive which is all digitalized, and people from anywhere around the world can search archives that are can search files within that archive. Can I imagine that in the IP court, maybe you would have some kind of smart, an AR judge maybe one day, or what can we expect in terms of technology?
Yeah, you're welcome to visit our new court, the IP court. Yeah, we have the case filing online, and the lawyers can look at the case files online. The information technologies are really advanced in the IP court.
Yeah. Finally, what language do you use when a foreign company appears? How do they overcome the language difficulty?
According to civil procedure law, the language is Chinese.
All right, we won't have the time to explain the details. Well, thank you so much, Shen Hongyu from the Intellectual Property Court under the Supreme People's Court. For more discussion, we are going to leave you with a question, as I always do, for our online viewers. Do patent systems help or hinder innovation? Please feel free to go to CGTN's Facebook, Twitter and other social media platforms to leave your comments. Thank you for watching Ask China. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.